Thank you everyone for coming. Really excited to be here and to share a bit of my experience and also maybe help some of you get started with extending Kubernetes and becoming a Kubernetes developer. I've been to a few talks so far here that have been talking about some of the more advanced aspects of creating controllers and creating operators, and I think from my perspective, not long ago, I hadn't even gotten started, so I didn't know what that all was, and I'd like to lower that barrier of entry through this tutorial today. So I talk about becoming a Kubernetes developer, but that's not a common term, I don't think. I mean, I think some people might use it, but not sure what the definition is right now. And I think about that because I think of three different interaction models that you might have with Kubernetes. You might be a user. You might be someone who has their application deployed to Kubernetes, and you have access to kubectl on the CLI, or maybe you don't. Maybe you have a user interface in some way that you access your deployment and your logs and look at things. You may even be an advanced user, just to say, but you're still someone who considers Kubernetes a place to run your software. You may be in the room and you may be an administrator. An administrator might be someone who creates clusters on demand for their organization. They might do some configuration of those clusters and may run some software themselves. This would be software that would support the organization, so things like monitoring applications, Prometheus, other tools that you might need. This is likely to be someone who's a bit more advanced within kubectl and other techniques, but someone who's really focused on the infrastructure side of Kubernetes. And what we're going to be focusing on today is the developer side. So this is someone who may or may not also be or used to be a user or an administrator, but it's someone who thinks about Kubernetes as an API and a framework and a way to solve problems. And so what they do is they use Kubernetes native aspects to extend that API and use that API to solve their business problems. And that's what we're going to be looking at a bit today. And so you might wonder, which one am I? I've been and am all three. I started my career in test engineering and was very much on the user side of things. I went into platform engineering and was a part of infrastructure teams for a few years there, and I was very much an administrator. And I'm now building a controller running inside of Kubernetes, and I'm very much on the developer side of things. And so by being all three of these things, both in recent history as well as simultaneously, the reason I'm excited to share this is because I found that barrier to getting started to be a developer just a bit too high. I just kind of was like, where do I get started? Everything seems really advanced. I need to be super advanced in Golang to even look at anything, and I'm not particularly a Golang developer. And I think that now there's some really great tooling out there to get people started, and that's what we're going to look at today. So when I keep talking about today, what are we going to do in the next 90 minutes? We have 90 minutes, and we have conference Wi-Fi. So just setting expectations. But what we're going to be doing is I'm going to do a very short introduction about what an operator is and how and why you might choose to use one. That's just going to be kind of surface level about extensions in that way. Then we're going to have a bit over an hour, hopefully, of kind of hands-on, self-paced time. We're going to be using an online learning platform, which means that we're only reliant on the website loading and not downloading Docker images and configuring your laptops. You don't need admin access or anything like that. But you're going to have a lot of time there for like kind of self-paced learning. And at the end of it, you will have created a create, read, update, and delete, or CRUD, operator that deploys an application, can update it, and can delete it. So you have the framework to then go back to your companies and extend that into your own worlds. So getting started with what is extending Kubernetes. Here's a diagram that is on the Kubernetes websites and documentation. And it shows all the points where you can extend Kubernetes because it is open source. And you can extend and you can rewrite anywhere. But realistically, most people using Kubernetes value the engineers behind it and value the decisions that they've made. So they only tend to extend in certain areas more frequently. So let's explore a few of those options. One option is at the CLI. So I've mentioned kubectl, kubectl. I'm sure there's a lot of people judging me right now. Sorry. But this is going to be most people's entry point to Kubernetes. And what you can do here is you can build command line tools off of an already existing CLI that people are used to. Crew is a fantastic way to manage these plugins. So maybe you can think about not creating a whole new CLI that people need to install and configure, but instead look to extend it through the marketplace on Crew. If you haven't used Crew before, give it a look. There's some really nice tools in there. Some of my favorites are the most basic. They're things like grep and a proper get all. If you've ever run kubectl get all and been like, but where's everything else? There's a plugin in Crew that actually gets all, and it's really great. So that's one place where you might think about becoming a Kubernetes developer and think about extending Kubernetes. Moving down the stack, you might think about creating custom resource definitions, or CRDs. This is a resource type that you probably have interacted with in Kubernetes before as a user, an admin, or anything else. And all it is it lets you define an interface. It lets you define a resource type. I'm not going to go too much into detail here because this is what we're going to actually, one of the things we're going to be doing here today. And so if you haven't worked with CRDs before, you're going to get a great introduction to them. One more layer down, you might think about actually running software and extending, using the API and events API within Kubernetes. And this is us talking about the operator framework, which is what we're going to be working on. With the operator framework, you can be listening to Kubernetes events and changes in the cluster and taking reactions accordingly. Again, I'm not going to go into great detail here because this is what we're going to be talking about and you're going to be doing a lot with in just a few moments. The final bit that I would just call out as maybe a common place to see extensions is sort of what's on like the node level and infrastructure level. So CSI is looking at the container storage and how you can add access to third-party storage items, ability to get through to databases out in the cloud and SaaS providers and things like that. So these are just a few of the ways in which you can extend Kubernetes that you may run into as you start to explore potentials. The text of where to find these is very small and vertical on the side, but all of these slides are already up on the KubeCon website, and so you can go there, check that out, and they have fantastic spidering links that you can get into rabbit holes galore on. So it's really great to see. So if we want to talk about operators today, we have to start with controllers. What is a controller? A controller is an application that runs inside of your Kubernetes cluster and takes something that is defined as true and checks that that is what's actually happening in reality. And the controller's job is to take what is defined as desirable and slowly, but eventually, get us to that state in reality. You actually have more experience probably with controllers than you might think. Because if you've ever used a deployment to deploy your application, you've actually used a controller. A deployment controller watches for a deployment resource type. And if and when the deployment resource type is different from what is really existing in the cluster, it makes the changes. It changes the replica set, and then in turn it will change the pods that are deployed. So I prefer working examples, so here's an example. You might have a deployment out there that already exists that has 2 replicas, quite common. And you might want to increase your replicas. You've gotten quite popular, and so you increase to 3 replicas. What happens is the deployment controller is aware of this change and goes, that's not what reality is. Let me go and create a 3rd pod. And then it just goes back to sleep, and it hangs out for a while until something else comes along. That's all that a controller does, is it checks what is defined state, what is reality state, and it is configured to be able to converge on the desired state. So you're in a tutorial about operators, and I'm talking about controllers. The reason I am is because it's a bit like squares and rectangles. All squares are types of rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. Every operator under the hood is a type of controller. It takes the desired state and converges it into the reality state. Not all controllers are operators. So now it's important to look at what that difference is. What is an operator? An operator is that representation of operational knowledge into the controller, into that ability to converge on desired to reality state, and reliably manage it. I've here pictured Argo as an example of a tool that has an operator that you may want to check out, you may already use. There's lots of operators out there. There's an entire operator hub where you can check out what tools provide these. What an operator is it's actually just a package of resources within Kubernetes. It includes those custom resource definitions, or CRDs. It includes deployments, services, whatever you need to be able to use that application. So with the operator, there's a capability model that describes how mature that operator is when it comes to operations. Level 1 being it can deploy the thing. This is what we're going to be talking about mostly today. But there's so much more to operations, and it's why this is a really interesting model if you're thinking about that day 2 operations of your application and how you want to handle that as a platform team, as an operations team, and so on. So as I said, today we have 90 minutes and less, because I keep talking, to go into building this operator. So we're only going to be focusing on creating a level 1 style operator. You're going to learn how to generate a framework for that, and then extend that framework to actually deploy your application, make it visible through a service, and then even update it and delete it. What we're going to do to get started today, there I am, is I'm going to give you all a website in just a minute. And the website you will get to, it looks like this. And in here, this is going to be your process to get started. So you will get to this website, and you can get started. Click on the link to get started. It will bring you through to the Instruct platform where you'll sign up. This does not require an email validation to get started, just to call out. So yeah, you're going to get dropped straight into it. No need to worry about that validation. Once you put in your username and password, though, you'll get through and click to get started. And in that bottom right corner, there'll be a green Start button that you can click through to and begin the course. The course is all of, oh, that's how that button works, huh? Next. Cool. So we're going to get hands-on. I personally, when I'm in tutorials, hate when someone's talking at me and I'm trying to learn something, read something, and keep pace with the instructor. So I'm not going to be doing the course up at the front to get started. I may jump in and start doing that if we're finding problems with anything going on. But I'm going to leave you all to get going on it. The program has all of the details that you need as you go through. But obviously, that can feel quite isolating. You're here in a 101 tutorial, and you don't know where to get started, and you want to try something new. So first of all, that website that you can go to at the top not only gets you through to the course, it also has some common error messages and some tips and tricks in it. It also has a link to that second link, which is a Q&A. So this is it's anonymous or not. Feel free to put your name in, but don't feel like you have to. And here you can ask questions, whether they be about the platform, whether they be about the course, if you get stuck, or whether they be about operators. I'll be monitoring that, and if there are questions that can be helpful in the moment, I'll likely jump back on the mic and answer them. If they are questions that are more generic, I'll come back maybe towards the end and have a wrap-up Q&A. So please jump in there, ask questions. I'll be answering them both verbally and also on that website live as they come in order to try and get information out to you all as quickly as possible. The last piece is, I really don't want this to feel like a library with everyone studying by themselves. I want this more like a coffee shop, hanging out, learning together. So I do plan to play just some light instrumental music, just to encourage. Feel free to chat to the people next to you. If there's any sort of accessibility issues with the music being played, obviously, please let me know, and I can figure something out there, turn it off, turn it down, whatever we need to do. I want this to be accessible and open to everybody. So that is where we're at. So please go to that link at the top and go ahead and click through and get started. This is a course that may take more than the allotted time, but it's going to be open for at least a week after the conference, possibly more. And it will depend on your experience level on how quickly you go through. So feel free to take your time and explore a bit. If you've never looked at Golang before, it might take you a bit more time. If you're quite confident, that might go a bit quicker. But don't stress out. This is going to be available to you for at least a week after the conference. So go at the pace that you're comfortable with. All right? Do we have any questions before we suggest turn on the music and get started? That I might need a bit of help with. All right. I will. Let's see. I have unlimited. Who did? Oh, AHA slides capped us. Oh. I will get you a new link for Q&A. Give me a second. Sorry about that. Is there any other questions? That's a great one. Thank you for letting me know. All right, I will get you an anonymous way to ask me a question in just a minute. Go ahead and get started on the course, and please let me know. I'm sorry? Yeah, I think I just forgot to pay. That's fine. It's like, it's super cheap, so yeah. I just think I forgot to do it. Forgot the DJing. I believe that the Q&A is now up and running. So I've tested in a few different browsers, so hopefully I'm not just caching that I have access. Please let me know if that is not available. Good, got some thumbs up, awesome. So please use liberally, and I will be walking around as well. Firewalls can get us on anything. So if you're having a hard time getting to the Gitbook website, I've just added a question that has a link directly to the Instruct tutorial. So if you're having a hard time getting there, go ahead and use that link. And the website does have some interesting information on it, but you should be okay without it. And you can always check out that website at a later date. So did I not do it? Oh, other people can't. Another way to get that out there. What can you get to if you can't get to Gitbook? Sorry, that didn't work. to upgrade AHA slides. Done that, got access. But also, apparently KubeCon can manage to break GitHub. So I'm hearing that some people are getting rate limited on make install. There's not much I can do about that, but from what I hear, if you just wait for a second and retry, it does come through. But I'm sorry, I didn't let them know we were going to have such a big tutorial at KubeCon so they could up their limits. So hopefully, stop and restart will do that for you. some people are still getting a bit rate limited by the download during a make install. I think that may be because of the downloading of the customize tool. So what customize does is it allows you to template out YAML files, and the Q builder uses that under the hood to be able to allow some of the files to be a bit nicer to read, but then include the complexity necessary to build operators and controllers. If that's happening to you, we can talk about how to possibly download customize in a different way. So if you raise your hand and you're super stuck by that, maybe, there's lots of you. All right, let me figure out the answer then and I'll come back to you. But I think it's basically on downloading customize. So if you can find a different way to get customize, then so it's just going to get a little bit more complicated, right? So sorry, it's not quite as intro. But in the make file, it tries to download customize for you. And what you can do is you can change that make file on your local machine to instead use an installation that you get in a different way. So if you can somehow kind of curl through to a different customize, I'll try and get you an example of that and get that onto that Gitbook website. But that would be one way to maybe work around it. Sorry, you're rate limited on one. It'll be around. We have a workaround, so it's in the Q&A that you can now see. I'll get it up onto the top of the screen here, where you can install customize using Go, which will, for now, not be rate limited. We'll see what KubeCon can do to that. Let me get that up on the screen here. Hang on. That's going to be a hard thing for you to copy. I will get that onto the website here, the Gitbook. So, you'll see if you're on the Gitbook page, under the errors sidebar, there's a new item around the rate limit, and you can copy and paste the command from there, which is the install customize via Go. Hopefully that'll get some people around that problem. other questions that have come up that it's just worth making sure everyone's aware of. So one question was around the playlist. Also, all on the Gitbook page. So basically, anything you want to know about this presentation, the slide deck, the playlist, the access to the course, tips and tricks and all that are on there. And I'll be updating that as I go. So for example, adding the error from the make install. So I'll add some more things as they come up. And that page will be up indefinitely. So feel free to go to that when you need. And the instruct invite link will be live for at least a week. So if you want to go through this again, if you want to share it with a friend, anything like that, you can go through for at least a week. And you can even restart from where you left off. So don't feel like, but I just did an hour of this. How do I get back? It's OK. You can start from exactly the point where you left off, and it will load you back there. So that's great. I do want to call out, we're also getting rate limited on the Docker pull on the final step. So just because it likes to make things interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and make a really quick hotfix where I basically load that Docker image onto the base image of the course. And if it works, I'll get back on the mic and let you know. But in the meantime, I should probably answer also one of the many interesting questions. I'll come back with more at the very end. But there was a question here around, do you need to use Golang to build operators and controllers? And the answer is no, not at all. It's just an application that's running as a deployment in Kubernetes and responds to things. The thing is that the Golang ecosystem in Kubernetes is one of the most mature. So your access to things is going to be much higher. The tools like KubeBuilder are going to exist. And so that's why it's the most common language to be used. But that doesn't mean you have to. I'll be back shortly. Hey everyone, just to sprinkle in some more answered questions in a very loud voice. There was a question as well around if the operator is a subset of controller, what other subsets of controllers exist? And I would answer that with saying that it's about what else you can do with controllers more so than like subsets. Like operator is its own class. But I gave an example just earlier today of a really good controller that handles secrets updates. So if you imagine a situation where you have an application, it's deployed via a deployment, and it uses environment variables that it takes from Kubernetes secrets. If those Kubernetes secrets update, do you want your application to update, like to refresh the pods and to pick up those new secrets or not? You can set controllers that listen for secret changes and then immediately do a reload of your pods, a reload of your deployment. So these are all these kind of challenges which are, hey, when one resource changes, I want to take an action. That's what controllers really thrive on. So thinking about those issues, and again, this is like the paradigm shift that I definitely went through, and that I think when you understand how Kubernetes works, you have the potential to start solving your problems in Kubernetes instead of in other tools. Because like I've seen that problem solved through running a pipeline on like a cron job, like always just making sure that you redeploy the thing every like hour, it'll pick up any new secrets. Also a solution, but it's done in a kind of external way versus thinking in a kind of Kubernetes native way. So have a think about that, basically. There was also, just to call out, a question around the CRD not being visible in their list. So if that's someone who wants me to come over and have a look, I'm happy to, if you give me a wave down. But also just to remind people, if you do get a bit stuck, you can press skip. And as long as you've read through all the things on the right, you will have learned that step of things, and you can then progress to the next one if you find yourself in a bit of a pickle. What that does is it replaces the code with a known working version, and then, yeah, so hopefully that will get you unstuck as a worst case scenario. I'll pop back on with another answer in a few minutes. I come bearing answering of questions, one question and one help, hopefully. So first of all, I know some people are hitting some issues with deployments not looking healthy. So you say get deployments, and it's supposed to say 2 of 2 are ready, and you're seeing it saying 0 of 2 ready. If that's the case, you can, if you're familiar with Kubernetes, you're welcome to try and debug that a bit. But what I'm seeing is that's because of a rate limit pulling from Docker Hub to pull the demo to-do app. So what I've done is I've added, if you go back to the Git book page and refresh again, I've added another error page, just racking them up. And this one has a different image. It's stored in the ECR registry instead of the Docker registry. It's not going to be a very pretty application to look at. It'll be an Nginx homepage, but it will still at least get you past the process of actually seeing the deployment go live and seeing it as a service and seeing the web page. So just to reiterate, that'll get you through the process of this tutorial, and you can always come back and redo it with the to-do app, though I'm not sure it's that fantastic. Yeah, so that hopefully will get you all a bit unstuck. And there's instructions in there on where to sub out my to-do app with the baseline Nginx image in there. There's also a question around what other options there are outside of KubeBuilder. So KubeBuilder is actually built on the shoulders of giants, like almost every technology that we use today. And so KubeBuilder under the hood is using something called the Operator Framework, Operator SDK. And that is a very powerful tool, but it's also very raw. It's not opinionated in the way that KubeBuilder is. So there's a few options basically on how kind of quick start you want to go, or how opinionated you want to be with what you get started with. I've found that with KubeBuilder, it is opinionated enough to get started without yet, for me, running into major backlogs or major issues, because we can just always drift away from it. It was really a get started quick option more so than a long-term stay within KubeBuilder's framework. So yeah, so have a look around at the underlying operator framework if you're interested in a little bit more customizability and more detail. I'll be back with more soon. Give me a hand raise if you need anything. All right, time flies when you're having fun. We've managed to get to the end of the 90 minutes. I can see a lot of people have managed to get quite far despite some of those error messages and the rate limits, so thanks for your patience with all of that. Just to reiterate that this is going to be available for the next week at least, and so the machine you're using is a cloud machine. That specific instance will get shut down, and so you'll come back and you'll need to skip to wherever you were in the process. But what's great is that Instruct will keep track of where you were and just give you a skip button, and you can press go, and you'll get right back to where you were. So please do revisit, please do share with your friends if it's helpful, and remember that the Gitbook link is permanent and has access to slides and everything else. So there's only a few minutes, about 5 minutes left, so I'm now going to interrupt all your concentration and answer any questions you might have. If anyone has a question they haven't put in Q&A, please raise your hand. I'm happy to answer verbal questions as well, but if not, I'll try and tackle some of the ones that we've got in Q&A. So to get started here, we've got a question around what the V1 Beta 1 meant in the way of API versions. So this is basically custom. You can do whatever you want when you're versioning. It's like any other piece of software. There are like kind of specific meanings behind the versions in Kubernetes that talk about, it's basically semantic versioning around, is this a breaking change? Is this not a breaking change? And I basically was just saying that this is like brand new, no promises it'll be backwards compatible and that kind of thing. But you can make that version whatever you need, and you should use it to indicate the maturity of your operator and the likelihood it will break on future changes. So yep, just like any other piece of software. There is, any questions from the audience? So there's also a question around whether or not you should build from scratch or use something like KubeBuilder. I mean, this is, again, a really good question that can be answered by just any of your other kind of principles at your company around software development. So you have an option when building operators and controllers to go completely from scratch, to go from a pretty low-level framework, or to go from something like KubeBuilder that will give you an opinionated getting start quickly. Same thing goes when you think about software code. You can go in and write kind of compiler level like C code underneath everything. You can go in and use something like Ruby, which is a language, or you can choose to use something like Rails, which is an opinionated way to code in Ruby. And so this is something that I can't answer for you. It's something that you'll have to think about within your team and your goals as a company on where you want to be, and likely the complexity of what you're trying to solve. Again, I definitely have a soft spot for get started quick, because I find that often your problems are not that unique. You're 1 in a million, but there's more than a million in the world. So if you can use opinions by people to get started, and then when you hit the rough edges, deal with those, that's usually my personal default, but it very much depends on your context. Any questions before I pull another one out of the hat? All right. So there was a question around what make run and KubeBuilder create API does, the difference between that. So KubeBuilder create is basically a way to inject either a controller or a CRD into your ecosystem. So you can generate a CRD, which will then be something that your controller can listen to, or it can actually create a controller and an API. And each of these applications can have more than one kind of controller running. You can inject more into it. So that's why that command kind of exists. It allows you to add to your operator, to your controller, a new API. So that's one side. So what that's doing is it's like code generation, and it's actually generating the API and the CRD. What make run does is it gives us a really fast way to be able to iterate on development. So when you think about building any website, the first thing you do is not package it up into a Docker image, push it out to a registry, push it through CI/CD and straight into an environment, because the feedback loop for that is quite large. What you want to be able to do is make a change, see that change locally, validate that it looks about right, and then go through the efforts of a CI/CD pipeline to then test it in a more realistic environment. Make run is the local development version of working with your controller in KubeBuilder. Make run takes that Golang application and runs it on your local computer with access to your Kubernetes cluster where all the resources it's responding to exist. If you continue on with the course through till the end, the last step of the course describes how to progress from that local development environment to something actually running in Kubernetes by first building that controller into a Docker image and then using the make file to actually deploy it into your cluster. So this is all like an example of how you might work as a developer working on this. You wouldn't likely want to go deploy this to production until you'd introduced create, read, update, delete, which you were doing throughout this course. And that's why you start with local development. Any final questions? We're right at the hour, or the half hour. And I'm butting into lunch, so I'm grateful that all of you have stayed here. Thank you. Please do give feedback, either through the formal channels or come find me. I love to chat about my journey into this and how I got here. I have stickers as well. If stickers are, I see laptops with stickers on them. If I can help decorate, I'm happy to. But seriously, thank you all for coming. I hope this was helpful, and please feel free to reach out at any time. So.